Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to this second virtual webinar or virtual meeting of the AbFly User Group. Last session we had on 17th of July, we were pleased that we got eventually over 160 people were able to join, many on the YouTube channel subsequently. And I'd like to welcome back all those of you who were at that session, and in particular welcome newcomers who've joined us for the first time this evening. The programme I think will last about an hour, depends really on question and answers. We've got some flexibility on that, so but that's what we're basically aiming for. And for those of you who would like to ask questions of any of the panelists or make comments, please use the Q&A facility on it's a chat thing, isn't it, on this one, which will be either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on which type of machine you're using. I'm on an iPad, so everything's across the top. I think on laptops, they run along the bottom. Peter Brooks from the AbFly committee will say a few words on what AbFly has been up to in the last, since the July session. And then we'll move on to Vicky from London Northwestern Railways. So can I hand over to you, Peter?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Just a bit about what AbFly's been up to. Although the trains haven't been running as much as they should have been, due to obvious reasons, AbFly have not been idle, and we've kept up the pressure on London Northwestern to get the trains running again. After all, this line is one of the few in the country that hasn't been running fully since lockdown in March. We've also asked the train company to make adjustments to the replacement bus and train services, which is being done very well to suit the users of the line. We've also been out and about when we can to monitor the services and the information that's been provided. We're pleased to say that actually, when the train services did start running again, numbers increased, which shows there is a demand for the Abbey line, and we look forward to a more reliable and full resumption of train services soon. As Vicky hopefully will say and confirm, we're going to get more or less a full Monday to Friday service from the December timetable change. We've also ensured that stakeholders, including all of our local councillors, mayors and politicians, have been aware of the situation. And we've also liaised with our friends in the Marston Vale line user group who are in a similar situation, and also our neighbouring Watford Junction user group. We've also continued to get involved with various things, such as the Watford Junction redevelopment proposals, the Community Rail Partnership, who've got some good schemes coming up, such as a new user line guide and website, and also the Bricket Wood Loop project, which Trevor's going to talk about soon, which would obviously transform services on the line. Looking ahead, we're also pressing for the provision of part-time season tickets and carnet type tickets to be available, and other things on our wish list are better accessibility between platform and train at stations, and a cover over the walkway to platform 11 at Watford Junction. The line has also had a good write-up recently on the bus and train user website, which is run by Roger French and Jeff, who did the All Stations video, which he visited. We've had a good write-up on that, and also some comments have been added on the website. Just a reminder, if you need to get in touch with us, AbFly, please visit abfly.org.uk or email us on info@abfly.org.uk. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. How's everything with you now, Vicky and Richard? Is everything set up?
Okay, so to be honest with you, not a huge amount has changed since when we met back in the summer. A lot of the things that you would have been seeing at the stations have continued. So there are a lot more hand sanitizers at the key locations. The one-way systems and the new wayfinding systems, they are still there in the stations, with Northampton and Milton Keynes being two of our best examples of where that was introduced right at the beginning of lockdown and where it's continuing to work. You probably will have continued to see the polycarbonate screens for the gate line staff, and they are still very much in place. And we're still encouraging passengers to make their journeys as contactless as possible with the introduction of the smart card, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. We still continue to see a high proportion of passengers wearing the face coverings, and there's still a really an enhanced cleaning regime on our trains and also at our stations. And the posters and the passenger comms continues to be a major part of our plan and our campaign, so that people are aware what changes are happening, what is happening on the line, and when they can expect to see further changes, which means that they will either have to plan their journey in advance or look to where they can make certain changes to their journeys. Passenger numbers unfortunately remain extremely low. We're currently looking at around -80% of the pre-COVID passenger journeys that we were making before March. We did start to see a slight easement when lockdown was lifted over the summer, but since we're now in lockdown 2, again the numbers have started to dramatically decrease. And like I said, we're on certain routes we're carrying around 15 to 20% of the passengers that what we were travelling and carrying before lockdown. Some of the things that we've done to step back up that service from the beginning of March. So we operated a key worker timetable that was operated between the 23rd of March and the 17th of May. This reduced the capacity to less than 50% of our normal service. We then introduced extra capacity in our May, July and September timetable changes, and that's what's in place at the moment. And that's giving us around a 90 to 95% capacity on most of our routes. As a timetable change in December, the upcoming timetable change, there are no major changes or any changes of major significance that are coming up, apart from the 2 branch lines where we will be uplifting the service. And we've also seen an increase in COVID-related staff absenteeism as well. So just to give you an idea of what we're looking at the moment, we've got around 160 of our colleagues off at the moment. That's across the whole of the network. But obviously that's having quite a big impact on our services, and also with certain depots where we've seen someone go off with COVID, and then because of the track and trace, other colleagues having to go off as well. So it's quite difficult for me to be able to show you this, but as Peter alluded to in his update, the Monday to Friday timetable uplift that will be coming in from the 14th of December means that we're looking at a pretty much all-day service on the Abbey line, apart from 2 services in both directions, which will be covered by rail replacement buses. It's a huge advantage really, and we've also been doing quite a lot of work with the Rail User Group to make sure that the timetable that's enhanced and changed reflects some of the feedback that they've been getting throughout lockdown, but also some of it before lockdown as well. And so some of the changes that we've been able to make are things that we've been engaging and consulting with the Rail User Group on. On the Saturday timetable will remain pretty much the same as what it does at the moment. And it's worth saying that at the moment, the biggest risk to all of this and has been able to run the timetable, the plan is that there's that ongoing risk and challenge in terms of train crew availability, especially as we are right in the middle of the winter months, with people going off sick, whether it's COVID related or not, but train crew availability does remain our #1 challenge in terms of being able to run this timetable. The Sunday timetable, it's still very much unclear as and when we'll be able to reintroduce that Sunday service. It's certainly something that we want to be able to do, but we need to just make sure that we can run the Monday to Friday and the Saturday timetable with confidence before we look to make any further changes. It has been discussed, although not yet confirmed, that we might be looking at more than 2 timetable changes during 2021. So that's something to bear in mind, that we are trying to be a lot more flexible than what we have in previous years. Certainly this year has been an example of where we are able to make short-term timetable changes. So we'll certainly keep you posted as to whether we're able to bring in the Sunday service earlier than what we would be expecting to do in the May timetable change. Encouraging people back to rail, well, it's certainly something that we're very, very keen to do. I'm sure every single train operator company is trying to find ways of how they can encourage people back to rail. A lot of the work that we've been doing has been in partnership with our colleagues from Transport Focus and other industry bodies that are doing a lot of research, a lot of surveys, and finding out what it is that people are feeling right now in relation to rail travel. And we understand that everyone's journey is very different, and that's very different to how it was before COVID hit. We're continuing to growing and understand how people are feeling and what those barriers are around returning to public transport. One piece of research that's been done, which was carried out on around 1,000 passengers, found that around 40% of people at the moment are happy to travel, which means that they will just jump on the train as it is now. They won't need to look into how they're going to travel, the journey or anything like that. Extra 40% need reassurance, so that means that they are online, they're looking at what the train operating company are doing in terms of keeping the trains clean, their stations, whether there's any unknowns that they're unsure about. And then the final 20% are those passengers that are absolutely not ready to travel yet. They don't feel confident, they don't feel like they are ready to return to rail. So any piece of marketing campaigns that we do in the near future need to take all of these passengers' feelings and thoughts into consideration. So it's certainly something that we're looking at when we're looking at our future marketing campaign, and how we're going to be able to bring people back, and what they need to be able to feel like they can get back on a train again. The smart ticketing, which we introduced during lockdown, has had quite a big success, really. I mean, taking into consideration that we've only got 20% of our normal passengers travelling, we've got over 1,967 cards have been issued. 174 of those are active. And we're seeing really good uptake of the smart card from Leighton Buzzard as well as Northampton. We've also got a couple of people along the Abbey line which are using the smart card technology. At the moment, it's only available for season tickets, so that's annual, monthly, and weekly season tickets. But we are trying to push that as much as possible, so that it's another way for people to feel safe when they are travelling. Moving on to the new trains as well. So we've got a fleet of Class 730 electric trains, which are being built in Derby by Bombardier. Unfortunately, this fleet of new trains hasn't been impacted by COVID, same as a lot of industries at the moment. And so there is a delay on these trains as and when they'll be introduced. But although the work was delayed, it's good to see that work did continue during COVID. They just had to reduce their workforce during the time while people were working. They'll start to come into service on West Midlands Railway on the cross-country lines later on in 2021. And they're due to arrive here at some point during 2022 for West Coast mainline services. And the first trains at the moment are on test run in Velham, and then they'll be returning over here for their testing over in the UK. There's a lot of work that's been happening during lockdown on community rail and station adoption. And it's really encouraging to see the amount of work that has continued. So, for example, at Watford Junction, some of you may have seen some of the improved planters that are on platform 9. That was a huge piece of work carried out by volunteers from a number of organisations in Hertfordshire, as well as myself and the CRP. And so we've emptied those planters, the built up planters on platform 9. They've now been refilled with soil and bark and spring bulbs, and the Bee Friendly Trust will be coming back in spring to be able to plant up some spring planters. And then we've also got as part of that project, we've also got some children's artwork and some information boards to go up. You might have also seen some additional posters that have gone up at all the stations on the Abbey line. These have been produced in partnership with Communities First, and they've been designed to really help people that are struggling at this moment in time with their mental health. The posters signpost people to where they can get additional help, and just to let people know that they're not alone during this time and there is help out there for people that need it. And our partners at the Women in Community Rail have also produced a number of breathing space webinars, which are designed for people either in the community rail world or the rail industry, with some useful and helpful webinars. So some of the topics that they've been looking at is around mental health awareness and looking after yourself. Also making sure that you get the right balance of your work and your life balance, as well as how you tackle working at home and working in isolation when you've been very much used to being working in the office or working out and about doing lots of visits. There's a lot that we need to celebrate as well during this time. So we've been able to get new adoption groups at 4 stations along the London Northwestern route. We've also had over 30 new volunteers sign up. And with the Community Rail Awards, which are taking place next week, we've got a number of projects that have been put forward by the Abbey line. They've been shortlisted, as well as some of our station adoption groups at Berkhamsted, East Stratford and Woburn Sands that have also been shortlisted for awards. And the community rail world is doing quite a lot as well to encourage people back to rail. So the Marston Vale Commuter Rail Partnership have come up with a symbol spot project, which is all around getting families out and about on the network, learning about the Marston Vale line as well as rail safety. Together with Edna and Building Better Opportunities, we're embarking on a 7-week programme to help people who have either learning or physical disabilities, so that they feel confident to get out and to use the train. And the new Abbey Line website and attraction guide will also help to encourage people back to the Abbey Line to find out more and visit more of the places that are on the Abbey Line. And then, not wanting to take Robert's thunder by the end, but we've had some fantastic news that the Customer and Communities Improvement Fund has been approved. So for those of you that might have known, the 1.7 million pot of money, which was announced at the beginning of the year, was put on hold by the DFT until September. So we've now had confirmation that this scheme will take place. And for London Northwestern Railway, it will fund 12 projects, a number of different projects, but some of the key projects that it will fund is to bring the disused building at Bricket Wood back into use. It will also tackle some of the challenges around homelessness in Milton Keynes. It will improve some of the station facilities and environments, and that one is specifically around all of the stations on the Abbey Line, with new waiting shelters at Watford North and How Wood, a new community transport trial at Tring and Cheddington, and also some training programs for young adults that will help reach out to some of those more isolated members of our communities. It's great news as well that the next year's scheme will go live, and so we've got the same amount of money to fund even more projects that will go live in February 2021, and we'll be looking to kick those projects off in the summer of 2021. Just a couple more things that I wanted to make you aware of that were in my business update. So the introduction of a Class 350 on the Abbey Line. It's looking very positive that we'll be able to do this in early 2021. We're just working through a few things with Network Rail, just to make sure that we can run that, but it is looking really positive, and there's huge buy-in from both our train planning team as well as our customer experience team as well.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I've been looking to see if we have any questions. I don't think we have at the moment. Are you able to hang around for a little bit longer?
Yeah,
right.
no, I'll hang around until the end.
That'll be excellent. Thank you very much indeed for
Okay.
that. And thank you for the very thorough and extensive presentation as well. It was very helpful indeed. Thank you. Shall we move on now to Trevor Mason from Hertfordshire County Council, who can perhaps update us on the latest in particular on the passing loop study that the DFT and Hertfordshire County Council are progressing at the moment.
Just want to give an update on sort of three main areas. The most important one is the Restoring Our Railways project for the Abbey line. And I'll just give a bit of background to that for those not familiar with that. So first of all, it's Department for Transport programme that was announced earlier this year, often referred to as the Reversing the Beaching Cuts project. So it's about looking at trying to restore local services. So it's more about reopening closed lines or new stations or improving services on local lines. So we put a bid in earlier this year with support a number of local groups, including AbFly and the District Council to that programme. And there were 60 bids and we were one of 10 that were successful in that round. So that was really pleasing. I just see last week there was a further 15 schemes selected as part of the second round, but we're in the first round, then one of 10 moving forward. Basically, what that means is Department of Transport will provide 75% of the funding for a study called a Strategic Outline Business Case, which I'll explain a little bit in a minute. But basically, there is funding towards doing further work on this, and the other 25% of the funding will come from the County Council. There is a steering group set up to take this forward. The groups there on the screen, so Department for Transport, Network Rail, ourselves, and London Northwestern Railway. And I think the really important thing is it's nice to have the money to do the study, but actually it's even more important that Department for Transport and Network Rail are on board with the process to develop this SABC and work with us to get the best possible case. Normally when you do SABC for transport thing, you work on it and you basically submit it and then you get assessed. On this process, Department of Transport and Network Rail through the steering group will actually help us to get the best possible outcome and best possible report, which I think is really important. And secondly, I think even more importantly, it has basically got Department of Transport and Network Rail on board, and that's just totally invaluable. So where before we might be banging on the door trying to get let in, effectively Department of Transport basically opened the door and said, come on in, we're part of this process. I think that's far more valuable than the even funding for this process. It's a recognition that Department of Transport and Network Rail see this as a potentially good scheme to take forward. So that is key to everything, I think. Having said that, I think we see this as a once in a generation opportunity. I've been looking back, there are different guises, but there are 17 reports about the Abbey line over the last 20 years. It's been going around, there's been a long desire to improve frequency on the route. I think this, with the involvement of the Department of Transport and Network Rail, basically this is our big opportunity for a generation to either get this scheme actually delivered, or if it's not going to go ahead, I think basically Department of Transport won't countenance any proposals for another 25 years or so. So it's really important to get this right. If it does come out with a good outcome, there's a real good chance that the scheme will get delivered in a matter of just a few years because it seems a fast track process. Having said that, there is a sausage machine to go through, as anything with Department of Transport, which is my sort of blue chevrons there. So we're at the SABC, the Strategic Outline Business Case stage. What that means is basically it's assessed where there is an overall case, whether it's a justified, actually it's a viable scheme to deliver, but it must look at all the options as well. So it will look at a single passing loop, it will look at multiple passing loops, it will look at light rail and potentially other options. It has to do that as part of the process. And the outcome of the SABC will be to say, yes, actually, there's justification of the scheme, there are a number of options, we need to take it forward. That's just a flag up that at the SABC stage, there won't be a, yes, let's go ahead and build a passing loop. It's still got to go through other parts of the sausage machine. So just trying to manage expectations. If it gets through that phase, which hopefully it will do, it then goes to the OBC, the outline business case, which basically says of the key options, which are the best ones, and it will come up with preferred option. That then has to go through a business case to see whether it really stacks up in terms of cost and benefits, and then you have to get someone to fund it, which is primarily the Department of Transport. So there is quite a process to go through, so we mustn't get too excited. It's really pleasing that we're in this project, and there's a lot of positives around that, but we do have to go through this big process. Having said that, Department of Transport has said this might be a light touch approach, so they won't necessarily do what they do for all schemes. So parts of this, so some of the elements there in those blue chevrons may possibly get combined together, but I don't think the Department of Transport actually know what the process is yet. It's kind of being sort of made up as we go along. That's fair enough. So, but just be aware there is a process we have to go through. It's really good we're in there, but just manage expectations of what will come out. In terms of where we are, we have a fortnightly catch-up meeting, progress meeting with the players. I showed on the earlier slide. There was a period of several months before the DfT started the program for when bids are actually successful bids were announced. So it's a bit of delay, but now we're in a process where meetings are happening. There's a detailed, well, a brief developed to say, look, basically we're looking at trying to improve the frequency. We've now got the funding signed off for the DfT, which is another bureaucratic process, but we haven't got the funding letter sorted, so we can go ahead. Department of Transport wanted to do a special modelling process for this and change their mind how to do it. So there's lots of procedural stuff we need to deliver, which is delayed moving this forward, but we're now actually cracking on with it now. Consultants who are basically our framework consultants, the ones we work with all the time on transport, formally commissioned the end of last month, and now they are moving forward with the work. We expect that report, the strategic outline business case report, to be completed in January. So just to remind you, that won't be the end of the process, but it'll be a key milestone in terms of whether we can take this forward. And at that point, the Department of Transport will make considerations about how it also moves forward through what I'm calling the sausage machine. So some really good news and progress on there, and obviously we'll see what comes out in January as to where we are and how we take that forward. We are hoping there'll be additional funding for next rounds to take that forward, and that is part of the Restoring Your Rails program, that there are other funds to tap into. And it's kind of like explicit promise that once it enters the machine, they'll keep going until it either delivered or rejected as not being a positive scheme there. So fingers crossed it's a positive scheme. So that's broadly where we are with that project. And just on other matters, we have our own county council rail strategy, which sets out our aspirations for the rail network across the whole county. Last time I spoke to you, we were hoping to go to our members, get it signed off in September. For various sort of reasons, primarily the backlog of papers due to COVID and the panel up meeting. We've actually put it back to December, so the meeting is on Thursday afternoon. We hope to sign off that rail strategy, and that'll be available on our web to look at. But it includes, for this line, the usual. So aspiration for improved service on the Abbey line, which is both a frequency issue and clockfest timetable, but also make references to sort of later evening services. So it's not just purely frequency. And as we've flagged up before, we want to see Watford Junction developed into an even more important passenger transport hub around all the various rail connections and other bus connections and coach connections that can be put into that process. And obviously Abbey Line's part of a key part of that hub. So that's should hopefully get signed off on Thursday afternoon. The papers are already available on our website, and then obviously we'll take a while just to tidy up document in its presentation, and then it'll be on the website for everyone to look at. But hopefully it's pretty much everything you would expect to see for the Abbey Line included in that document. The final bit I want to talk about is the A414 corridor mass traffic transit system. We have talked about it before. I know there's some issues and worries about it. The map, anybody can see it very clearly or not, but it's just indicative of really the towns it wants to connect. So it's connecting right across Hertfordshire, and indeed into Essex, so Harlow in the east across to St Albans, and then St Albans gets into Hemel and to Watford. So obviously it's the same transport corridor as the Abbey line. Very much an early stage here, so don't take those lines on the map as being where it might be. It's just an indication of the sort of connections that might be made. There are no actual route decisions on that yet, but I know sort of people have been concerned about that. What I want to see is we go through restoring a railway, we get a passing loop on the Abbey line, we increase the frequency, and then the Abbey line with increased frequency becomes part of a sort of multimodal, as it were, rapid transit corridor. So whatever the mode is going to be across the county, and then heavy rail for the St Albans to Watford section. That seems entirely feasible to me if we get improved frequency on the Abbey line. So there's no actual routes yet determined, other than obviously St Albans to Watford is the key corridor. There is the actual type of technology, whether it's unlikely to be heavy rail, the whole system, but whether it's light rail or guided bus or whatever has not been determined. The scheme itself has to go, sorry, and before I say that, there have been some technical workshops, and AbFly, I believe, have been involved in at least some of those workshops. There is a strategic outline business case to be developed, and which is a much bigger one that I'm currently working on the Abbey line, because it has to understand where it might go, whether it serves existing town centres or new housing developments, etc. So there's a lot of work to be developed on the routing, and at this stage. At the moment, there's probably the next stage of public engagement will be in the summer next year. Hard to pin down yet, because I'm not entirely sure exactly when all the work will be completed, but that sort of time. So also happy to report to this group where there's opportunity to feed into that process. But say the technology for the system, the exact routing of the system is still very early days on that, and nothing's been decided. So I think that's really all I wanted to cover. So happy to take any points or questions on any of that if anyone has anything.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Could I ask one question? You were talking about the consultants and the DFT now progressing work with a view to having a report at the end of January. Are they aware of prior work? You mentioned all the other reports that have been done over the last 20 years. In particular, the one I suppose we have closest interest in is the one done by the Railway Consultancy just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So first question.
Yeah, and simple answer is yes. The reason why I know it's 17 reports because I've compiled them all together, and they're all shared with the consultants and with a sort of summary of what they all say, as well as the detailed reports. And obviously, the latest report, the Railway Consultant report, is part of that process, because that's obviously the latest report and has ways of delivering a passing loop. It's maybe slightly different to what others have considered. So all the previous work of the last 20 years, certainly the ones we can find, are with the consultants. They can consider that, and that's important. And that will help a lot of the work in terms of the options, because a lot of that work has already been looked at in the past.
Yeah, excellent. And also, just building on your last two the issues you raised, particularly the A414 corridor, and also all the developments that are planned along the Abbey line, notably in the St Albans District City Council area. Have they been fed into the process as well?
Yes. One's local plan is slightly interesting situation in terms of it's been withdrawn as it now. I never quite know catch up with the positions, but there's been huge issues around the plan's position on Radlett site in terms of rail freight terminal or housing, and there's been a lot of toing and froing with the planning inspector around that. So it's a state of flux. What we'll feed into any bit of work, obviously the 414 corridor, but also in particular the Restoring a Railway project, is the most up-to-date figures that we've got for housing development. And I think, one of my comments on the Railway Consultancy report was the figures they used, which was all the publicly available figures at the time. They have moved on, housing numbers, and there may be some information that we can use that's potential housing that hasn't actually been agreed yet. So we'll get the maximum numbers in there because that will improve the business case for the Abbey line. So yeah, we'll use the maximum housing numbers that are available of and any other economic growth figures, jobs that are there to feed into that process. So there's the best possible level of benefits to feed into this case. I think what I didn't say is the economic case for this route probably is probably pretty marginal and possibly negative, and the Railway Consultancy report actually gave a negative economic case. The good thing about restoring your railway programme is that the DfT has said sort of the wider strategic case and wider benefits will actually play a bigger part of it. So if increasing the frequency on the Abbey line doesn't actually wash its face in terms of the extra revenue is less than the capital costs and running costs of an increased service, it still may be a benefit in terms of it has a better service, it provides some resilience to both the West Coast and Middle and Main line in terms of a better alternative route. If, for instance, you can't get from St Pancras to St Albans on the Middle and Main line, if you can do it with increased better connections, basically Watford Junction by that way, because of increased frequency, that stacks up. There's also benefits to potentially relieving congestion on the M1, M25 junction, because that's the parallel route of this, and other factors. So the way the DfT will look at the Restoring a Road project is slightly different to previous ones, which is in Abbey Line's favour. I'm not going to say there's going to be definitely a positive result, but it's in a better position than if they were just taking their sort of very hard-nosed process of, does it stack up economically? Yeah,
thank you. There's a couple of comments come through as well on, it's not directly related to the Abbey line, although it's indirectly so. It's concerning the rail strategy that you mentioned going to the Cabinet panel this week or next week. And it's about the Metropolitan line extension and also the Aylesbury link. From recollection, I know when the AbFly put in our representations on the rail strategy, we pointed out that the rail strategy was commending a link from Watford across to Aylesbury, but didn't seem to be pushing particularly for the resurrection, if you like, of the Metropolitan line extension. And the two seem so inextricably linked, we couldn't understand that. And that's a point, I think, which Leslie Freitag has just raised in the Q&A.
Yeah, and it's about being careful how we approach this, in that I think our aspirations primarily are Watford westwards, which is to Aylesbury. One of the ways of doing that is restoration of the Metropolitan line extension, because of the Watford North curve, or I've forgotten the name of the curve now, which doesn't exist anyway. You could have run trains from that direction into Watford Junction with the Metropolitan line extension. We have to recognise that TfL are basically taken out of their budget a couple of years ago, and there's no sign that they're going to restore that, and probably at the moment even less likelihood with obviously the financial issues around TfL there. So it's about sort of saying, yeah, we want that. We're not going to specify it because actually that might just knock it on the head. There may be other ways of doing it. I'm not sure if there are, but it's leave it open in terms of the actual specification of the project, but we have an aspiration of the outcome we want in a better rail link. It may be the Metropolitan line extension resurrected. It may be some other way. There may be possibly a way of linking via the old Ebury Way route. I don't know, but it's better to leave it more open rather than just being shut down as the TfL are not going to fund the Metropolitan line extension. I think it enhances our case, enhances the chance of something happening rather than just being shut down straight away.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions at the moment. So are you able to hang on for a little while longer?
Yep, certainly, yes.
So just in case any come up at the end, I mean, we're going to move on now to Robert Yorke to give us a brief update on the Bricket Wood Heritage Station Heritage project.
I'm assuming everyone's aware of the aims of the Bricket Wood Station Heritage Trust, which is the restoration of the disused station at Bricket Wood, to restore it as near as possible to its original 1903 state when it was constructed, and to change its use to provide a community facility by way of a tea room, a meeting room, and a sort of historical archive to serve Bricket Wood and the surrounding areas. As Vicky said, I mean, it was great to secure funding from the Community and Customer Investment Fund earlier this year, but disappointing, obviously, for obvious reasons, that this was then put on hold and the project went into limbo. However, the Trust did have enough money from other sources, Community to Rail Partnership and local groups within Bricket Wood, to continue the work, and we're able to appoint lawyers to negotiate our lease with Network Rail, who own the building, and we were able to instruct our architects to submit a planning application back in March. Planning permission was actually granted in May for a change of use for the tea rooms, meeting rooms, and for the restoration works. The lease is still ongoing. We're having a bit of problems getting Network Rail to sort themselves out, and but we're pretty close. We're pretty close, and I'm hopeful that within the next couple of weeks that we can secure that. We are working now that the funding, as Vicky says, now the funding is back in place. We have to just tie up some bureaucracy with London Northwestern Railway to secure the funding. But in anticipation of that, we are teeing up our architects and other specialist consultants on railway historical matters so that we can get detailed drawings prepared for submission to London Northwestern Railway, Network Rail, and to the building for building regulations permissions, and a couple of outstanding conditions on the planning permission relating to the kitchen operation. Hopefully, if all goes to plan, we should be on site early next year, with completion towards the end of next year. The current works are actually a sort of phase one, in that will get us most of the way towards what we set out to achieve. But the intention always was, I think, that we would be submitting a second application for funding from London Northwestern's phase 2 Customer and Community Improvement Fund, just to finish off some of the works. The original conditions that we were working to was we were asked to get the building open as a community facility initially, and then as a phase 2 fit out the tea room and coffee shop. We do not think the funding we have at the moment would allow us to do that, and we will be having to make a second application. But on the whole, we're fingers crossed. If the money is there, the Trust is pushing ahead, and hopefully we will start work in the new year. I'm sorry I don't have any slides of what the station will look like. I'm using an iPad, but if you look at the Trust website, I think all the drawings, the planning permission details are all on there. But hopefully, possibly by this time next year, fingers crossed, we can have a building restored and ready for use by the community and by passengers using Bricket Wood Station, which will give them a facility, and also hopefully dispense with these sometimes antisocial behaviour which we have around the station. I'm not sure I've got anything else to add beyond that. If there's any questions, I'm willing to take.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robert, for that. It's good to end on a positive note, something we can look forward to in the near future. In fact, I think that's a theme from all the presentations. I think there's so much going on at the moment, which hopefully will result in many improvements for users of the Abbey line, and hopefully attract more people to use the line, which is of course what community rail is all about. And it's good to see so many initiatives which involve the local community, from the ones that Vicky was talking about earlier on in terms of the planters and the artwork, and indeed Robert just now on the Bricket Wood Station Heritage Trust. I do commend looking at their website. It's very detailed. It does have detailed plans and also examples of similar sort of facilities on other stations around the country. So I think there's a lot of very useful information on there. I think we've got another question here, which I can't quite. There's a question about, somebody's asking a question about Robin's question. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, it's about changes to Euston services next year because of the high-speed work. And when we are likely to know more about how that might impact on people travelling from Watford Junction, or indeed from the Abbey line through Watford Junction into London. I think that's a question which Vicky is taking away to talk to her train planning people. So I suspect that's one that we will have to get back to you on subsequently. And for those of you who are not already on our email list, do subscribe. If you go onto the abfly.org.uk website, you'll see that you can join the newsletter there. And that's a very useful way we have of keeping you all informed about developments that take place between our meetings. I think that I'm pretty certain that Richard is recording this, so we aim again to put this up onto YouTube. And again, on YouTube, there is the opportunity to make comments and respond with questions there, which we can either tackle ourselves or pass on to somebody we know. Unless there are any more questions, I think that's about, yep, that looks as though, as far as I can see, unless Richard has got any that are secretly bypassing my machine.
No, there's the one question in the Q&A, which with regard to the proposed timetable for weekdays, which Vicky's answered that the new timetable is up now.
Yes. Okay, well, perhaps I could draw things to a close. Miraculously, we're finishing even ahead of time, which I think is the first time anything I've chaired has ever happened. Can I thank all our participants? Can I thank all the speakers in particular, Vicky and Trevor, Robert and Peter, for all the work they put into their presentations, and indeed the work they put in between our meetings. They're obviously very committed to the line and do a lot of good work. And we're very pleased that we have such a good relationship with all the key stakeholders on the Abbey line. So I think without further ado, I'd like to say thank you for joining us, and to keep a watch on our YouTube channel and indeed on our email messages that Richard sends out periodically. So thank you all very much. I wish you all happy tidings for the moment with Christmas and other festivities approaching. I hope you enjoyed as best you can, and thank you all very much indeed.